Good evening. I'd like to call to order the August 24th, 2020 Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop. City Clerk Sint, would you please do the roll call for us?
Councilmember Juniman?
Here.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Mayor Abrams?
Here.
And Councilmember Nevlett will not be joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's workshop?
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Smith, a motion to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then let's go to a vote. Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Aye.
Councilmember Juniman?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion is approved. We have one agenda item on our workshop tonight, and it is the budget workshop number 2. City Manager Coleman, do you want to start this out? And then our Finance Director, Ellen Pulseth, has a PowerPoint for us tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This is, I think, the third time that we've talked about the budget. And so we will spend some more time on it this evening. Some of the slides that you have in your packet are repeats, but there are a few new slides. Some of those are comparative information with how we're comparing with other cities of our size and cities around us. At the end of the workshop, there will be an opportunity to review again what we haven't been able to do this year, which we believed were some priorities for you, but also to just give you another chance to talk about adding back in. And this is not something that would affect our tax levy of 0%, but it's something that we believe that with some other savings that we've had in some other areas since some of our meetings, most recently savings in our healthcare benefits, that there is a little bit of latitude to add in the playground if you wanted, or the EDA levy if you were interested in doing that. And also as a reminder, the playground was something that we took out of this year's budget because of financial concerns. It is already the money is already there. It's in our park access fund. And so this is something that Ms. Palthus is going to ask you towards the end of our presentation. And this is the lead up to our meeting on September 14th, where we are required by law to set our preliminary levy. And I would also ask you at the end of this meeting, if you could, Mayor, ask the council members if they feel like we need to have some more time spent on any particular area of the budget, or you want us to review other options for you with regards to the 2021 budget. Please let us know that. If not, we will just bring it back under regular business on the 14th. With that, Mayor, I would turn it over to Ms. Palthus, and she can go through her presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Okay, this is our second time of really looking at the budget. So tonight I will go through some of these slides pretty quickly because you've seen them before, but I do have new tax information that will be of interest to you. So I did want to spend a little bit of time on that. So we'll be looking at the initial tax estimates that will be resulting from this budget. Again, strategic priorities, always the first thing we look at. We are primarily talking about the general fund and some of our a couple of capital project funds when we talk about the levy. We have 64 funds, which is about half of what we had when I first started. So we've done a pretty good job of streamlining. We have a little bit more to go, and we're kind of looking more like what our peers our size have. We had a lot of extra funds, a lot of funds that residual funds, capital project funds that needed to be cleaned up. And so we've made a lot of progress on that. So the preliminary tax levy is an increase of 0. We're looking at a $23 million levy, which is exactly the same as what it was last year. So what may change, as we discussed, would be there may be some movement between the general fund and potentially the capital project fund or another fund. So as we talked about, there's some savings through payroll. Primarily health insurance savings. We budgeted for 18% increase and we have a 5% increase. So we do have about $100,000 that can be moved from the general fund. So in the end, we'll kind of talk about where the council should be thinking about what they may want to do with that, whether they want to let that sit in the general fund, whether they want to add a playground back in, whether they want to add that HRA levy that we talked about last year. Those are just some things we'll talk about at the end of the slide. So what is happening with the city property taxes? The average or the median home will see a decrease of about $10 on the city share of the property taxes. The reason for that is primarily due to an increase in fiscal disparities. And so I will touch on that when we get to that slide. Median home here is shown in the red ink with the white numbers. So approximately just about 1%. These numbers will change slightly before the end of the year because this is this process evolves. These values get established throughout the year. There will be various things that affect the values. Mid-year homesteads will affect the tax capacity. So this is a very close approximation of what you can expect for next year's taxes, city taxes. Not much has changed. The general fund in 2020 was about 75% of the levy and very close to 75%. Not a lot has changed in that regard. As far as the general fund revenues, in the previous year, property taxes provided almost 74% of the revenue stream. It's 76% for 2021, and that's simply because some of the other categories shrunk a little bit. We're projecting slightly less revenue in city-generated revenue because of the COVID crisis, and also slightly less in intergovernmental revenue, and that was by design as we had a one-time revenue in 2020 that we did not, we utilized that for fund balance. We did not use that to balance the budget, but so that was actually by design. So slightly more property tax dependent in 2021. As far as expenditures go, just a slight shift again. Public safety was nearly 55% last year. It'll be nearly 57% this year. That's primarily because an officer was added, but that officer was paid for through a grant. So, but that does shift the expenditures. Also, Parks and Recreation, seeing a big reduction there from 5.6% of expenditures to 2%. So that is just a logical course of what happened with the restructuring in that department. By category, again, 75%, nearly 76% is wages. Nearly 20% is contracted services, which is auditors, attorneys, architects, engineers, professional fees. So 95% or more of the expenditures are people. Just a high level look at the general fund. As you can see, to balance the budget and work back to the same amount of property taxes that we needed for the overall levy, the property tax levy had to be slightly reduced in the general fund. So that was a 4.18% reduction in funding sources between the other revenue category and the general property taxes, and a 2.33% reduction in expenditures. A lot of that was due to the park restructuring. As you can see in the prior year budget in 2020, we budgeted for a $450,000 surplus. That was due to that one-time money coming from the state of Minnesota. There is no surplus budgeted for 2021 because we're expecting a large surplus in 2020, as we talked about, as a result of receiving CARES money for some of the 2020 expenditures. The point, I guess, about this slide is we need to be cognizant that we are not budgeting for a surplus. We typically do budget for a surplus because as expenditures increase, more money is needed to pay for the bills in the first half of the year. So we talked a little bit about that last time, so I won't spend too much more time on it. This is what will happen in a projection of what will happen. In 2019, we nearly hit the top of our ceiling. And when I say that, our minimum target is 41.67% of expenditures and our maximum target is 50%. So the amount of fund balance should fall between those two, and we nearly hit the top of it in 2019 due to surplus revenues, mostly building permits and plan permit fees. In 2020, we're expecting to actually go over that ceiling. We did talk about that. That will be there for a cushion for 2021 and then can be reallocated as the council members see fit. This projects out to 2025, but I do want to point out that it does include an additional $200,000 fund balance increase in the years 2022 to 2025. So the chart that I just showed you regarding the general fund for 2021, we did not budget for a fund balance increase. We may have to do that, especially if the CARES money is reallocated. And I shouldn't have said CARES money. I really meant general fund surplus. So pardon me for that. Overall, the general fund expenditures were reduced by $542,000. That was that 2.33%, primarily due to the park restructuring. Full-time employees were reduced by 5, again, primarily due to parks, but there is some offset with that extra police department police officer who was being paid for through a grant. Okay, so now to get into the interesting part. So this is where the tax levy history has been for the city of Maplewood for the last 9 years. The average increase, if you average it out, is 2.8% per year. There's some zeros in there and some 2s, and there's a 5 in there, but overall, fairly conservative over the last 9 years. The tax capacity history has been fairly positive for the entire time period, about 5% per year. This is the past 8 years. You can see there was a slight dip in 2014. That's when there was a very, very large tax petition was awarded to one of our very, very largest taxpayers. Then you can see it steadily climbing, which is a good economic indicator. The fiscal disparities distribution, I touched on this a little bit earlier when we talked about, maybe I didn't go into detail, but when we talked about the $10 increase or decrease in city taxes for payable 2021, most of the reason is due to the fiscal disparities. As we talked about, our median home in the city of Maplewood increased about 6.2%. So typically, had there been no increase in fiscal disparities, homeowners would have seen an increase regardless of the 0% increase in levy. Homeowners would have still seen an increase in their property taxes due to that inflation of their home values. So over the past many years, I mean, it does happen. In 2016, there was a slight decrease, and and also in 2019. But we've been seeing a pretty steady trend of increases, and this is a real big factor because this year it increased over $250,000. So that really helped to bring those taxes down. And so a little bit about fiscal disparities, because there's always a lot of questions about that. It's a regional approach to solving the infrastructure problems in the entire Twin Cities area. It was developed by the Metropolitan Council in the late 60s, and it basically is a cost-sharing mechanism to developing infrastructure in the entire metropolitan area. So in cities who have large commercial tax bases, they do quite well as far as property taxes, whereas cities that have low commercial industrial value have very high taxes. So what they did was they pooled the commercial industrial property values, and Anoka County is actually the county who does the calculations and the disbursements. So they pool the values, and then it gets distributed through a formula. And in that formula, Maplewood is a gainer from the program, because the city doesn't put as much in commercial industrial value as other cities, so we actually gain from that. So your slide might be wrong. I just updated these numbers. These numbers were put in at 9 o'clock on the night before the packet deadline. So that was just a function of when these numbers are available from the county. They had some tweaking to do, and so I didn't get this slide updated. But your slide in your packet should say is exactly what it says on the screen. Maplewood will receive $3,447,368 from the pool, and that's an increase of $253,000. So we're very thankful for that. So as a result, the city continues to decrease its tax capacity rate. So over the past 8 years, average of 1.75% per year. You can see in 2016, the increase, the large increase that was related to some of those petitions and property values, reduction in property values. So ever since then, there's been a steady decrease, and it's not. It might sound biased for me to say this, but I've heard it from much better sources than me. It is a sign that the council is doing their part on keeping taxes low. The council has not been using the extra capacity that it had available, because it would have increased property taxes in the city. So in an effort to keep property taxes low, this is an indicator that the council has done their part, even if taxes increased in some of the same years that the rates decreased, because that is often the case. The council has still done their part, and I think our auditor pointed that out to you as well. These are just the factors all put together. You can see the city tax levy over this period of time, slightly different. One was on the other screen, 2.8% average annual increase. Tax capacity increasing more than that, and fiscal disparities increasing on average considerably more. And so that has really helped keep the taxes down and helped you to lower those tax rates. And it did it again this year. Just a quick look at the total Ramsey County market values, almost back up to 60 billion. I shouldn't say back up. It's an all-time high. The county recovered from the recession in about 2018 or 19. It got back up to the pre-recession values, and now it's up near 60 million. The signs are very good, but they still are very unsure about next year. They don't know just exactly how it will play out, how many petitions they might receive in the meantime, and how it's going to affect next year's values. As you know, there's always a lag in activity when it comes to valuing home valuations. I've shown you this chart before. This is just that up and down chart. We saw a lot of nice steadily trending down charts of tax capacity rates, steadily trending up of tax capacities, and steadily trending of fiscal disparities. But due to shifts in the tax base, this is kind of what happens, and it's completely outside of the control of the city. It's due to shifts, and it's due to the inflationary increases that happen on the homes. So this is the medium home. There were years in which the medium home saw decreases, a couple of years in a row in 13 and 14. So it's very up and down, not what we like to see, but also not something that the city has control over. Back down again in 2021, so that's nice to see. But these swings are something we'd like to avoid, but we just don't have enough control over the situation. Again, just to point out that same point, I guess, this is a chart with the median home values. The blue is the median home value and what has happened with the median home value in Maplewood. And you can see where the median home city tax and when the orange line just sort of kind of follows it. And we've done a good job this year due to the help with the fiscal disparities where we've kind of closed that gap, but you can kind of see how little control the council really has over what property taxes will do. We talked a little bit about tax petitions with the county. This is their latest. Tax petitions are slightly up from 2019 to 2020. So in the blue, there were 725 petitions last year. There's 742 this year. Those numbers are not super alarming, but they really don't have a good sense yet of what will happen for payable 2022. So these are values that will affect payable 2021. They really don't know what they're going to see in terms of petitions. It all really kind of depends on what happens with the economy and with the market. So far the signs are good, but they really were not willing to make any kind of projection at all. Just did a survey of taxpayers or of cities willing to participate in the survey. A few dropped off this year, but Maplewood and Mounds View had 0% levies. Otherwise, we're looking at anywhere from between 2% and 7.8% in the cities that participated. You will want to remember that many of these cities were already tied into labor contracts that they could not renegotiate or were not. Did not feel that it would be, in their best interest to renegotiate. So a lot of it may be due to that. There may be other things going on in these cities too that we're just not aware of. But so we did a pretty good job, I think, by holding the line this year when so many were not able to. Just a quick look. The 2018 numbers are the latest numbers that the state auditor has as far as spending when we compare with our peers. Maplewood is outlined in the yellow. So I have these sorted in order of the amount of population. So we fall pretty close to the average population, about 103% of average. We're kind of right in the middle. We don't have too many peers who really fall right in there with us. So kind of look at in terms of population anyway, the city's right above us and right below us. We have about the average amount of tax capacity, about 100%, 100.2% of tax capacity compared to these other cities. So more than Cottage Grove and less than Shakopee. So that's interesting as well. The certified tax levy for 2018, we were about 105%. We will see that as we move down the line here, that's mostly related to debt. So it was 21 million in 2018. Our current expenditures, that's just kind of a government financing way of saying operating expenditures, meaning it excludes capital. So our current expenditures, which I have found this pattern emerged over the last 4 years and continues to be right around 80, 81, 82% of the average. So we're doing a good job at keeping spending down. 23 million is what we spent in 2018. Comparing that with the cities right above us and right below us. And I did want to mention again that with Andover, it is a little bit difficult to even include them because they don't have a police department. They've always had a contract with Ramsey County, and it's always been that way. So they've managed to grow into that model and make it work. But it does really it is a little bit misleading. But I've also kept Apple Valley on the high end. So it just gives you a little bit more perspective to look at that. Our capital outlay, we were at about 85% in that particular year. That one can really vary. So debt service, we've seen this time and time again. But it is trending down. I think it was over 300% last year. So, and part of this was due to a refunding, but you can see that Invergrove Heights also had a refunding in that year. So we've known this, and we also have known that it is trending down. And you can see then when you add the total expenditures, the city's about 106% of the average, and that is totally because of the debt service. Comparing then the debt as a percentage of debt and capital as a percentage of total expenditures, we're still above average. totally due to our debt expenditures. And debt service as a percentage of total expenditures were 265% of the average, but I will tell you that this has trended down each year of the last 4 years. The outstanding bond to debt also trending down. I can't remember the number last year. I think it was over 200. So we're about 141% of the average. So getting very close to where we want to be. If you take a look, we've actually had a couple of cities move past us, which this is the first year, Richfield. And there was one more, I believe. I'm missing it here as well. So I'm coming close anyway, St. Louis Park. So anyway, not absolutely the top one on the list of peers for this time, for the first time. Debt per capita is always something we're watching as well. I think that's where I wanted to point out that there was two that surpassed us, Richfield and Inver Grove Heights. So moving along, making progress on that outstanding debt. Also, I think these are good indicators altogether. This is just a chart showing you what that looks like. So the blue chart was the operating expenditures, and the orange chart was the capital, and the gray, the gray section was the debt. So you can see where Maplewood's debt brings spending up to where it is. So we're working on that. This is a peer comparison of 2019 taxes. City taxes only on a $250,000 home. That puts Maplewood somewhat close to the middle, again, with our debt service being a big part of why we're up kind of more than average. And this is just our neighbor comparison, where we would expect to probably have higher taxes than some of our smaller neighbors, but it just gives you some perspective. The city taxes are what's in blue, and the orange taxes are the total taxes. So you can see Ramsey County cities kind of show up fairly good there with the higher taxes in Ramsey County. Just wanted to bring this out as a point of interest for the sake of transparency mostly. To balance the budget, we did slightly increase the overhead charges that we charged to the utility funds. Basically added back a small amount to the ambulance fund. Now that we've got them back with $1 million fund balance, but not planning on increasing it to 300, 250 where we had it before. It was too much pressure on the ambulance fund. It's been my goal to reduce these overhead charges to 5% of operating expenditures. So far, we've only been able to get them down to 8%, but we made some significant progress on it. But this is not the year that we're going to make additional progress. So with moving the ambulance fund back into the picture, we actually increased the amount, and that was part of the general fund balancing strategy. Otherwise, mostly remaining the same, slight increases to expenditures going up. But this is something that we've been working on for some time to reduce the reliance. You can see in some years it was up to 800,000 and more, trying to reduce the reliance on our utility funds and enterprise funds so that those funds can be used for capital. I'll quickly just remind you that the $73 million CIP is still in process. There's really been nothing changed except that the fire hall project still includes the sale of property as a funding source. If that property does not sell, we will have to revisit our funding plan before we issue bonds for that project. It may be that you will have to issue the bonds and sell the property later. That will involve increasing that outstanding debt more than you really wanted to, but that may be the only plan that we will have if you want to move forward with that project. These are the major street projects that are included in the 2025 CIP, as we discussed a little bit earlier. There are still a couple of carryover projects from the 2020 CIP, and that's basically a couple of park projects. I believe it's a Sherwood Park and playground, and then maybe some work in the nature center in the, not on the facility, but on the grounds itself, a boardwalk and that kind of thing. So those projects are actually funded, and you may move ahead with those anytime that you want, because they have been funded and they have been through the process. If you don't move ahead with them, we may have to, this year, we may have to move ahead with them next year, but as it sits, we won't have them in the 2021 CIP because they were already funded in 2020. Financial policies, we're not doing much except slightly tweaking down our debt per capita benchmark that we are striving for. And we had to modify our investment policy just to make some housekeeping changes. And we are adding an accounts payable and an EFT payment policy. And those are some things that were requested or recommended by our auditors. And then also modifying our procurement policy to clarify that the technology purchases must be reviewed by the IT director. And this is to ensure that the IT department knows what's happening and what's being purchased, because they're ultimately going to have to support the project. So as we talked about, there will be, when we make payroll adjustments, there will be about $100,000 that you can repurpose to some other area, whether or not you want to add a playground back in. You recall we balanced the budget by taking that out. We still have one left in 2020 that we need to finish. So that is one option that you can do with that $100,000. You can leave it in the general fund and just let it sit in reserves until you decide what you want. You can move it into a capital project fund for equipment or any other capital purpose. Or last year, we talked about that additional HRA levy through the EDA. We did not accomplish that this year. That would be outside of the city levy, so it really would not show up as a city levy. It would basically default to fund balance if you chose to go that route. But then you would have that capacity to still issue that HRA levy this year if you wanted to. So the next meeting is September 14th, and that's when the preliminary levy has to be adopted. So we would like to maybe get some ideas of what you would, what your thoughts are on that $100,000, where you would like to see that allocated. Then you could actually have that built into our preliminary levy when you adopt it that night. So it would be great to hear some thoughts on that tonight. The final budget will be adopted in December, along with the remainder of the budgets for all of the other funds and the financial policies and the CIP. So again, just to reaffirm the tax levy that we're on the right, it's 0%, that we're on the right track. Policy decisions on the unfunded items, that can happen at any time, the 2020 CIP items, and we'd still like to hear some input on the $100,000 that we can repurpose that was part of the payroll levy. So with that, I will stop and certainly be open to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Paulsetz, for that very thorough presentation. I have a question about what we are doing. I know since I've been on the council since 2014, we have been very serious about reducing our debt. And as I recall the numbers, when I started in 2014, we were at about $80 million in debt. What is our current debt right now?
It's about 55 million, slightly less.
All right, so we've reduced it by about 25 million.
Right.
Given the fact that we're looking and considering a 0% city tax levy increase, just simply because of where we are with the uncertainty, with our unemployment rate, with businesses struggling, can you tell me what we are doing? What are you proposing this next year in terms of further debt reduction? Because we didn't, in the past, we've seen kind of the charts on how we have been regularly reducing our debt. And since I've been on the council, we adopted a debt policy in terms of setting some guardrails for the city and setting some goals and some benchmarks on where we want to be. So what is happening with our debt reduction looking forward to the 2021 budget?
So, Madam Mayor, that is correct. And the charts that I showed you when we went through the CIP process will be changing if the fire station funding plan changes. Because we did plan on, I believe, $1.5 million, $1.6 million in land sale proceeds that we will have to issue bonds for if that property doesn't sell. Now, when the property does sell, you can always put that money in the debt service fund and use it to pay off the debt. But that will impact the amount of outstanding debt, and it will raise the debt by another $1.6 million compared to what the last charts I showed you. What I can try to do is update those charts and give you a look at both scenarios, what would happen to the debt if the land was sold and what would happen if it wasn't, and I can probably have those available at the September 14th meeting.
I think that would be helpful. Can you also give us some historical information about the debt so that we can kind of put that all into perspective about where we've been? I know we're doing, in a number of these, we're doing at least 10-year snapshots. If we could do that, I think that would be helpful, at least for me, some additional information. What I'll do now is I'll go around and ask the other council members if there's anything else that they would like to see in terms of direction for our next council meeting. Councilmember Smith, do you have any questions or anything else that further direction that you'd like staff to be able to present to us?
Just one question and more of a clarification. There's been a lot of discussion around different municipalities around defunding police. And I just want to have Ms. Paulseth confirm and make very clear that we have no plans or intentions right now to do that in Maplewood.
So, Madam Mayor and Council, this budget does not defund the police. It actually adds to the police. There is an officer being added to help with the rental housing, but that officer is being paid for by a grant.
Thank you.
You bet.
Councilmember Knudsen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question from 2020. We talked about, the CARES Act and stuff. What's remaining from 2020? Is there any holdover?
So, Councilmember, the surplus, the projected surplus will probably be between 1.8 and 2 million. And again, that won't be, and I probably misspoke earlier, that won't be CARES money. It will be general fund money because the CARES money will have been spent. Sure. But because we spent CARES money, there will be general fund savings. So probably 1.8 to 2 million. Hopefully, that's kind of the projected amount for year end. That will carry over, and you will have that as a cushion. And if not all of it is needed, the council can decide how they want to proceed with those funds.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at as much flexibility as we have and as much in the reserve as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you described a lot of flexibility, which I like to hear. So, thank you.
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
Nothing really, except of course, I'm glad to see that with the debt policy, we're trying to lower the maximum yet again to $14.50 per capita. But I do understand what could happen if we cannot or do not by a deadline sell that property, that we will have to do something different because of the fire station. But that kind of thing happens in life. I mean, if we never had any catastrophes, wouldn't we all be happy? But I think what this says is that we're going where we said we wanted to go, because when something happens that changes your goal temporarily. But I think we're staying on course, which is the promise we kind of made. So I don't have any others. We are going to have our conversation later about what did not get funded, and so I will save my other comment for that. Thank you.
Okay. Is Ms. Paulseth, I know we're running over on this. Do you have enough direction from the council, or would you like additional comments?
Madam Mayor, no, I think we're fine unless you would like to comment on how you would like to allocate that $100,000 that we will find in payroll savings. If you'd like us to move that back into a playground, we can certainly do that and have that ready by the next meeting.
Okay. Councilmember Smith, what are your thoughts?
We have some sunk cost into the playground already, correct?
In the Sherwood playground, is that the question, Commissioners?
Yeah.
I don't think they have done anything so far on that one. That one is funded in 2020. So, what we're kind of looking for here is the 2021 money, because we will be able to move some savings from the general fund. And again, if you need more time, you don't need to decide it tonight, but it could go to a playground or it could go to the HRA. It'd be nice to have it teed up for the next meeting, but we can always make the investment before the end of the year.
I guess my feeling is the HRA is sort of a long-term investment that could probably, waiting a year on that wouldn't kill us.
Sure.
If we're going to earmark it, I would probably prioritize the playground, but I could be convinced otherwise. I'm also open to just holding it in reserve in the event that we have issues next year. I think that is also a potentially prudent move.
Thank you. Councilmember Knudsen.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm kind of along with Councilmember Smith. The playground thing kind of feels right this session and all the difficulties. Seeing things invested in the kind of the community and allowing people to enjoy the playgrounds, it seems like the right thing. And I agree with Councilmember Smith that if that doesn't seem attractive, I'd put it in reserve. Thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
I'm with them on the playground. I think when you've said that this is something you prioritize, we had a master plan, and on top of that, Sherwood Park is one that's heavily used. I think that would be my first priority. After that, I'm not quite sure whether I want in fund balance or the additional HRA. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would concur with my fellow council members in terms of playground. This has really been a challenging time for kids. And I think that to the extent that we can keep these infrastructure projects going, a playground seems to make sense. So I think that should give you enough, Ms. Paulseth, in terms of those additional savings. Earmarking that, you hear 4 council members talking about earmarking that for a playground. That really is a reinvestment into our community, and it is something that is definitely needed at this time and into the future.
Thank you very much, council members and mayor.
Okay. So with that, we have no new business, and therefore we are going to adjourn. And council members, we're going to take 5 minutes before we come back. We'll start at, let's do 6 minutes. We'll start at 7:20 because we need time to be able to change the graphics between our meetings, since we've got 3 successful meetings tonight. So with that, I will adjourn the Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop. Thank you, everyone, and see you in about 6 minutes.